Caitlin Clark, as always, is the story of the day. And today she is going what we like to refer to.
When a 22-year-old rookie steps onto the legendary, sun-scorched asphalt of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the absolute last thing you expect is for her to completely overshadow the most famous racing event on the planet. But that is exactly what happened in a moment that shattered every single expectation in modern sports history. You have to picture the sheer magnitude of the scene. Over 300,000 hardcore, adrenaline-fueled racing fans had packed themselves into the massive grandstands, completely surrounding the iconic Brickyard, waiting for the deafening roar of highly tuned engines. But instead of cheering for the legendary drivers who had spent their entire lives mastering the track, this massive ocean of humanity erupted into an absolutely deafening, ground-shaking roar just to catch a passing glimpse of Caitlin Clark. Stepping out of the official pace car as the Grand Marshal of the Indy 500, she didn't just look like a basketball player making a polite celebrity cameo. She looked like an absolute global icon holding court in her newly conquered kingdom. The footage of her standing in the back of the convertible, waving to the massive sea of screaming fans, went mega viral in a matter of minutes, completely taking over social media algorithms, dominating trending topics, and hijacking the broadcasts of major sports networks across the globe. She looked entirely in her element, smiling brightly for the endless barrage of flashing cameras and shaking hands with racing legends, as if she had been navigating this extreme level of global superstardom for decades. The entire world was utterly captivated by this magical, unprecedented moment, celebrating the dawn of a massive cultural shift, where a female basketball player was suddenly the undisputed, untouchable biggest celebrity in a city that had historically been obsessed almost exclusively with motorsports and professional football. To the untrained eye watching these viral clips on TikTok or Instagram, it looked like the absolute pinnacle of athletic success, a flawless, fairy tale transition from a historic, record-breaking college career straight into mainstream professional dominance. It was the kind of perfectly packaged, deeply inspiring moment that corporate sponsors dream of, signaling to the world that she had fully arrived and was ready to conquer the professional ranks with the exact same effortless grace she showed at the Speedway. But what those incredibly viral video clips and perfectly framed promotional photographs didn't capture was a dark, incredibly toxic, and highly dangerous storm of controversy, deep-seated jealousy, and immense psychological pressure brewing just millimeters beneath the surface. But that perfectly curated, smiling appearance at the racetrack wasn't the whole story, and the crushing reality of what awaited her the moment she stepped away from the cameras would shock even her most dedicated fans. To truly understand the sheer gravity of that mega-viral day at the Brickyard, you have to look closely at the terrifyingly desperate situation she was walking into when she finally arrived at the Indiana Fever training facility. This was not a franchise that was simply looking for a talented point guard to add to a solid roster. This was an organization that had been hopelessly trapped in the dark, miserable depths of the league standings for years, suffering through agonizing losing streaks and struggling to fill even a tiny fraction of their massive arena on a good night. The executives in the front office didn't just draft a rookie, they actively drafted a financial savior, a human economic stimulus package who was entirely expected to magically revive a dying franchise overnight. The sheer volume of pressure placed squarely on her young shoulders was absolutely astronomical, with secondary market ticket prices skyrocketing by over 300% and official team merchandise completely selling out in a matter of hours before she had even played a single second of professional basketball. She wasn't just expected to run the offense and score points. She was essentially tasked with being the smiling, unbothered, perfect face of an entire cultural movement, constantly shaking hands with wealthy sponsors, appearing at massive corporate events like the Indy 500, and literally carrying the financial weight of the entire league on her back. Businesses all across downtown Indianapolis were suddenly making millions of dollars in unexpected revenue solely because she existed, creating a phenomenon economists actually dubbed Clarkonomics, which only added to the terrifying weight of expectation. But while the executives, the television networks, and the team owners were busy popping champagne and counting their newly minted millions behind closed doors, a deeply uncomfortable and highly volatile resentment was quietly boiling over among the professional players who had been grinding away in the shadows for years. And the truth about that hidden resentment was fundamentally rooted in a shocking, incredibly polarizing financial reality that the league desperately tried to keep completely quiet while the national cameras were rolling. While Caitlyn was busy shaking hands with racing royalty and securing a mind-blowing, industry-shattering $28 million signature shoe deal with Nike, alongside massive, multi-million-dollar corporate partnerships with giants like Gatorade and State Farm, her actual WNBA rookie salary was a shockingly low $76,000. For decades, the hardened veterans of the WNBA had been fighting tooth and nail against executives for better pay, basic travel benefits, and just a tiny shred of mainstream media recognition, only to be constantly told that the money simply wasn't there and the market didn't care. Many of these women had been forced to spend their entire careers traveling to dangerous overseas territories in places like Russia and Turkey during their off-seasons just to make a livable wage, risking their safety just to play the game they loved. Then, completely out of nowhere, this 22-year-old rookie arrives, and the entire financial landscape of the sport shifts overnight, bringing in massive television deals, sold-out arenas, and unprecedented corporate sponsorships that the veterans had begged for but never received. Instead of universally celebrating this massive influx of cash and global attention, a highly significant portion of the league viewed her unprecedented, rapid success with deep, unspoken suspicion and outright bitter jealousy. They watched her get paraded around the Indy 500 like absolute royalty, dominating every single sports headline, magazine cover, and television broadcast, while former MVP-caliber veterans were still fighting just to get a local beat reporter to cover their games. This massive financial and cultural divide created a wildly toxic atmosphere behind closed doors, completely transforming the basketball court from a place of competition into a highly dangerous proving ground where the veterans quietly decided they were going to test this new golden child by any means necessary. What happened next on the hardwood completely shattered the illusion of a welcoming sisterhood, exposing a brutal reality that left millions of new fans and seasoned sports commentators completely speechless. The hostile treatment didn't just stay confined to passive-aggressive comments in post-game press conferences or shady social media posts. It violently spilled over onto the court in ways that clearly crossed the line from competitive basketball into targeted physical harassment. Opposing teams weren't just playing tough, physical defense against her. They were actively targeting her with vicious cheap shots, illegal blindsided screens, and outright physical assaults that routinely went completely ignored by the officiating crews who seemed too intimidated to blow the whistle. The absolute climax of this terrifying on-court bullying happened during a highly publicized matchup against the Chicago Sky, when guard Chennedy Carter delivered a shocking, completely unprovoked blindside hip check that violently sent Caitlyn crashing to the hardwood before the ball was even put into play. The referee, standing merely feet away, inexplicably called it a simple common foul, a frankly ridiculous and dangerous decision that instantly ignited an absolute firestorm of massive outrage across social media, eventually forcing the embarrassed league office to retroactively upgrade it to a flagrant foul days later when the public pressure became too much to bear. But the physical damage was already done, and the terrifying, unspoken message from the league's most hardened veterans was sent loud and clear. They were absolutely not going to protect her, and they were going to make her earn every single inch of her newfound stardom through pure, agonizing physical punishment. Legends of the NBA like LeBron James and Charles Barkley had to publicly step in, taking to national television broadcasts to openly blast the WNBA veterans for their incredibly petty, jealous, and physically dangerous behavior toward the exact player who was single-handedly making their entire league relevant and profitable. But even with basketball royalty demanding basic respect for her safety, the relentless physical beatdowns, the scratched arms, the bruised ribs, and the sheer emotional exhaustion only continued to escalate as the grueling season dragged on. But the physical assaults were only half the battle, because what the massive sports media networks did next was arguably even more damaging to her mental state. The massive television executives quickly realized that the intense controversy, the physical altercations, and the blatant jealousy surrounding her transition into the league was an absolute goldmine for their daily viewership ratings. They didn't just passively report on the outcomes of the games, they actively weaponized her name, manufacturing highly intense, deeply toxic debates and intentionally pitting players against each other just to keep the viewers hooked and the highly profitable clicks rolling in. They relentlessly fueled the fires of her collegiate rivalry with Angel Reese, purposefully framing every single matchup as a deeply personal, almost gladiatorial battle between good and evil, and occasionally injecting incredibly toxic, highly sensitive racial narratives into the daily discussion just to stir the pot even further and generate more outrage. Commentators who had openly admitted to never watching a single minute of women's basketball in their entire professional lives suddenly became highly vocal, highly critical experts, using her massive name to generate viral clips on social media and spark completely unhinged arguments on morning television shows. The entire media circus reached an absolute breaking point of unprofessionalism when prominent sports host Pat McAfee accidentally slipped up during a live, nationally syndicated broadcast, referring to Caitlyn with a highly derogatory and completely unacceptable term, calling her a white she, while ironically attempting to defend her massive positive impact on the sport. The immediate public backlash was swift, brutal, and completely overwhelming, forcing deeply awkward public apologies and completely exposing just how incredibly sloppy, desperate, and reckless the sports media had become in their frenzied scramble to monetize her existence. It was a vicious, never-ending cycle of blatant exploitation, where every single move she made, from driving a shiny pace car at the Indy 500 to taking a highly contested jump shot in a meaningless regular season game, was aggressively analyzed, heavily criticized, and brutally monetized by people who genuinely didn't care about her actual well-being. And while she was desperately trying to survive the relentless media circus and the physical beatdowns on the court, an even more shocking betrayal was quietly being orchestrated by the highest levels of the basketball establishment. Just weeks after her mega-viral Indy 500 appearance completely dominated the internet, incredibly persistent rumors began to swirl that the highly secretive selection committee for Team USA was quietly plotting to leave her entirely off the Olympic roster, headed to Paris. When the official, final team was finally announced to the public, the entire global sports world was absolutely stunned to see that the most famous, most heavily viewed, and most financially profitable female athlete on the face of the planet had been completely snubbed in favor of older, significantly less culturally relevant veterans. The powerful committee weakly tried to justify this highly controversial, universally criticized decision by claiming to the press that she lacked necessary international experience and that the prestigious roster was simply already too crowded with veteran talent to possibly make room for a rookie. But anonymous insiders quickly leaked the real, incredibly dark truth to the media. The established veteran players on the Olympic squad simply did not want her there, deeply fearing that the massive, uncontrollable media circus and intense global fan obsession surrounding her would completely overshadow their own individual moments of glory on the world stage. They essentially chose to protect their own fragile egos over the golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to completely explode the growth of the women's game on a massive international stage, heavily depriving the Paris Olympics of a guaranteed, record-breaking ratings bonanza and leaving millions of fans absolutely outraged at the blatant, undeniable disrespect. It was a massive, highly public slap in the face from the traditional basketball establishment, a glaringly clear signal that no matter how many hundreds of millions of dollars she generated for the sport, or how many incredibly viral moments she single-handedly created, the old guard still viewed her as a threatening outsider who desperately needed to be put in her place. Yet, even as the establishment actively tried to push her down and minimize her global impact, an even more terrifying, highly unpredictable threat was rapidly emerging from the very people who claimed to love her the most. The absolute darkest, most frightening side of this mega-viral fame began to rapidly reveal itself through the completely unhinged, deeply obsessive behavior of her own massive fanbase, creating a highly dangerous, totally uncontrollable environment that she was completely powerless to stop. The exact same millions of people who wildly cheered for her at the Speedway were now actively tracking her flights, stalking her every move, waiting in massive hordes outside of private team hotels, ambushing her at random public appearances, and completely invading her basic privacy on a scale never before seen in the history of the league. The security situation became so incredibly severe early in the season that a massive, highly aggressive mob of fans actually cornered her and her terrified teammates in a public airport terminal in Dallas, shouting, shoving, and aggressively recording them in a highly volatile, completely unacceptable confrontation that easily could have ended in a total physical disaster. This highly frightening, incredibly dangerous security breach ultimately forced the deeply reluctant league executives, who had stubbornly refused to spend money for decades, to finally cave in to massive public pressure and instantly implement a highly expensive, league-wide charter flight program, fundamentally changing decades of cheap, outdated travel policies just to keep their one golden goose safe from the unpredictable, chaotic public. But even with the sudden luxury of private planes and beefed-up, heavily armed security teams following her every move, she still couldn't escape the relentless digital harassment, as her so-called superfans began aggressively attacking other WNBA players online, sending horrific, highly inappropriate threats and deeply offensive messages to anyone who dared to foul her hard or speak poorly of her in the press. Caitlyn was suddenly, unfairly thrust into the totally impossible position of having to repeatedly publicly apologize for the highly toxic behavior of complete strangers, constantly being interrogated by aggressive reporters who demanded she answer for the completely unhinged actions of a massive internet mob she never asked to lead in the first place. It was a crushing, completely suffocating reality, where she was entirely damned if she spoke out against them, and totally damned if she stayed silent, forever trapped in a relentless, unforgiving pressure cooker that was slowly but surely chipping away at her youthful spirit and love for the game. All of this unrelenting chaos naturally forces us to look much closer at the heavy, completely unspoken physical and psychological toll this unprecedented, explosive fame is taking on a young woman who simply wanted to play the game she loves. If you actually take the time to look closely at her recent press conferences, peering past the highly polished media training, the massive corporate logos, and the polite, forced smiles, you can easily see the deep, lingering exhaustion in her eyes and the heavy, crushing weight of carrying an entire professional sports league's financial future on her back. You have to remember that she went directly from playing college basketball in the relatively sheltered, highly supportive environment of Iowa, straight into a brutal, unforgiving professional schedule, completely stripped of any normal off-season rest, recovery, or time to simply breathe. She has basically been playing highly competitive, incredibly stressful basketball non-stop since November, forced to immediately navigate a highly hostile, deeply resentful workplace, a predatory, click-obsessed media landscape, and a truly terrifying level of uncontrollable public obsession without a single moment to process her own meteoric rise to global stardom. There is a very real, highly dangerous possibility of total physical and mental burnout on the horizon. A terrifying situation where the immense, crushing pressure simply becomes far too much to bear, and the absolute brightest star in the entire sports world is slowly, painfully ground down into dust by the very massive corporate machine that happily created her. The incredible mega-viral footage of her smiling and waving at the Indy 500 wasn't just a fun, light-hearted celebrity cameo. Looking back, it was the ultimate, shining peak of the honeymoon phase, the exact, fleeting moment before the crushing, dark reality of professional sports politics, media manipulation, and intense human jealousy came violently crashing down on her head. As she continues to miraculously break incredible television viewership records, completely sell out massive arenas across the country, and entirely redefine the financial ceiling of women's sports for future generations, the ultimate, highly unsettling question remains completely unanswered. Will the massive sports networks, the deeply resentful league veterans, and the fiercely obsessive fans finally wake up, put their massive, fragile egos aside, and actively protect the absolute greatest asset they have ever been gifted? Or will they stubbornly continue to tear her down piece by piece, ultimately destroying the exact phenomenal talent that finally made the entire world pay attention?